Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News in Indian Perspective on All India Radio. This is Anita Anand and with me is Manoj Singh Rana bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. The headlines. Indian Cabinet approves 4,400 crore rupees investment in Export Credit Guarantee Corporation of India Limited, also extends foreign trade policy up to 31st March next year. India achieves another milestone in COVID vaccination drive, with total vaccination crossing 88 crore mark. Recovery rate reaches 97.83%. American generals admit that they advised US President not to withdraw troops from Afghanistan, calls it a strategic failure. Japan's former Foreign Minister Fumio Kishida set to become next Prime Minister of Japan after winning governing party leadership election. North Korea tested a newly developed hypersonic missile today. As the nationwide free COVID-19 vaccination campaign at government facilities for those above 18 years is underway, we advise our young listeners to get vaccinated and help others get vaccinated. We also advise our listeners not to lower their guard as COVID-19 remains a threat to our health. Please stay at home unless it is essential to go out and continue to follow these 3 simple steps. Wear a face mask, maintain 2 gaz ki duri for social distancing and focus on hand and face hygiene. For any COVID-related information and guidance, contact the national helpline numbers 01123978046 and 1075. And now the news in detail. The Cabinet has approved 4,400 crore rupees investment in ECGC Limited, formerly known as Export Credit Guarantee Corporation of India Limited, in 5 years to provide support to exporters as well as banks. Mr. Piyush Goyal said capital infusion and planned IPO to increase ECGC's underwriting capacity to 88,000 crore and propel additional exports of 5.28 lakh crore over a 5-year period. It will help create 59 lakh new jobs, including 2.6 lakh in formal sector. This decision is a part of a series of export-related schemes and initiatives taken by the government over the last few years. Extension of Foreign Trade Policy 2015-20 up to 31st of March next year. The Cabinet has also decided to release 56,027 crore in September 2021 to liquidate all pending arrears. These measures will provide a boost to the export sector. In line with this, the Cabinet has today approved capital infusion of 4,400 crore over a period of 5 years, that is from financial year 2021-22 to financial year 2025-26. The approved infusion, along with efforts made to suitably synchronize with the listing process of ECGC through the initial public offering, will increase the underwriting capacity of ECGC to support more exports. Cabinet has also approved listing of Export Credit Guarantee Corporation Limited through the initial public offer on the stock exchange. The company intends to increase its maximum liabilities to 2.03 lakh crore rupees from 1 lakh crore rupees by 2025-26. The Cabinet has also approved continuation of the National Export Insurance Account NEIA scheme and infusion of 1,650 crore grant in aid over 5 years. Capital infusion in NEIA Trust will help tap the huge potential of project exports in focus market.
जब छोटे निर्यातक एक्सपोर्ट करते हैं तो वो चाहते हैं कि उसका एक इंश्योरेंस कवर भी हो। ऐसी परिस्थिति में उनको पेमेंट के लिए इंश्योरेंस की सुविधा सरकार की एक कंपनी ईसीजीसी देती है। उसमें जो भी सामान एक्सपोर्ट होते हैं या जो पैकिंग क्रेडिट लिमिट्स बैंक्स देते हैं, उत्पादन के समय उद्योग को या प्रोजेक्ट फाइनेंस होता है उसके सामने भी पॉलिसीज इशू करते हैं। उस सबके लिए ईसीजीसी एक बहुत महत्वपूर्ण रोल प्ले कर रही है। उसको आज 4,400 करोड़ रुपए एडिशनल कैपिटल इन्फ्यूजन करने का, अधिक मात्रा में उनको कैपिटल देने का निर्णय कैबिनेट ने आज लिया। ये 4,400 करोड़ रुपए डालने से लगभग 88,000 करोड़ तो 20 गुना उसके ऊपर हम कवर दे सकते हैं। तो लगभग इसका इम्पैक्ट 3 लाख करोड़ तक के एक्सपोर्ट्स को कवर करने का एक साधन बनेगा, ईसीजीसी को और एक समृद्ध संस्था बनाएगा।
NDIA will be able to support projects export worth up to 33,000 crore rupees. It will help create 2.6 lakh new jobs, including around 12,000 in the formal sector. This decision is a part of a series of export-related schemes and initiatives taken by the government over the last few years.
India has crossed yet another milestone in the COVID vaccination drive, with the total vaccination crossing the 88 crore mark today. Around 25% of the estimated adult population has been fully vaccinated against COVID-19. The Union Health Ministry of India has termed it as yet another achievement in its fight against COVID-19. India reported daily new cases of less than 20,000. More than 18,000 new cases were reported in the last 24 hours. India's active caseload stands at 2,82,520, and it is the lowest in 194 days. Active cases account for less than 1% of total cases, and it is currently at 0.84%, the lowest since March last year. The ministry said the recovery rate is currently at 97.83%, the highest since March last year. Over 28,000 people recovered in the last 24 hours, and total recoveries touched 3,29,86,180. The US generals for the first time have acknowledged publicly that they had advised US President Joe Biden not to withdraw all American troops from Afghanistan and called the decision a strategic failure. Testimony by General Mark Milley and General Frank McKenzie to the Congress seemed to contradict President Joe Biden, who said he didn't recall any such advice. General Milley said the US had been taken by surprise by the speed of the Afghan government's collapse. The two US generals were questioned by the Senate Armed Services Committee along with Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin on Tuesday. General Austin conceded that the collapse of the Afghan army in the final weeks of the war, in many cases without firing a shot, took top commanders by surprise. However, he refused to resign from his position, defending the civilian administration.
Senior military officer, resigning is a really serious thing. It's a political act if I'm resigning in protest. My job is to provide advice. My statutory responsibility is to provide legal advice or best military advice to the president, and that's my legal requirement. That's what the law is. The president doesn't have to agree with that advice. He doesn't have to make those decisions just because we're generals. And it would be an incredible act of political defiance for a commissioned officer to just resign because my advice is not taken. This country doesn't want generals figuring out what orders we are going to accept and do or not. That's not our job. The principle of civilian control of the military is absolute. It's critical.
The hearing comes weeks after a chaotic withdrawal at the Kabul airport, and as the foreign powers sought to get their citizens home and thousands of desperate Afghans begged for rescue. A suicide attack killed 182 people during the withdrawal operation. 13 US service personnel and at least 169 Afghans were also killed at the airport gate on the 26th of August.
In Afghanistan, the Taliban have asked the United States to stop operating drones in Afghan airspace, terming the U.S. move a breach of national security. Taliban spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid asked all the nations to act in accordance with the mutual obligations to prevent consequences. According to a statement issued by the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, IEA, yesterday, all countries are the sole owners of the territorial and air sovereignty of their states under the international law. Therefore, the Islamic Emirate, as the sole legal entity of Afghanistan, is the guardian of Afghanistan's land and airspace, but the United States is violating all international rights, law, and United States commitments to the Islamic Emirate in Doha, Qatar, as Afghanistan's sacred airspace is being invaded by U.S. drones. These violations must be rectified and prevented. Mujahid called on all countries, especially the United States, to act in accordance with mutual obligations to prevent any negative consequences. Former security advisor to Donald Trump, John Bolton, has warned that the Taliban could get their hands on up to 150 nuclear weapons if the Islamists take control of Pakistan. Mr. Bolton said this is in an interview with the American news broadcaster WABC 77 after the American forces had withdrawn from Afghanistan.
The United States completed the pullout of its last troops from Afghanistan on August the 31st. It has left behind a large cache of weapons that has already been seized by the Taliban after the Islamists swept to power. Bolton's warning comes after the Taliban seized much of the equipment abandoned by the US during the chaotic end to the 20-year war in Afghanistan. The 8 Data Research Lab at the William and Mary, a university in the U.S. state of Virginia, has said China has loaned money to 13,427 infrastructure projects worth $843 billion across 165 countries over the period of 18 years. The research lab claimed that much of this money is linked to Beijing's ambitious Belt and Road Initiative, BRI. It said China has vastly outpaced all other countries in development financing, but the way in which Beijing has reached that level is extraordinary. However, according to the 8 data researchers, the Belt and Road project is facing its own issues. Issues like corruption, labor scandals, or environmental issues are likely to figure prominently in the times to come. Their findings suggest that in order to keep the BRI on track, China might end up to address borrowers' concerns. In today's Hotspot section, we bring you a discussion on the quest for a free, open, and an inclusive Indo-Pacific.
Today our discussion is centered around a free, open and an inclusive Indo-Pacific and what it means for India and also for the region. Ambassador Trugnath, when we see this discussion which is currently taking place on the necessity and importance of having an Indo-Pacific which is free and open, how do you assess the situation for India given the background, of course, of China's very aggressive and a continuously aggressive behavior, not just in South China Sea, but with India and with global political powers also?
Simranji, in fact, as you know, that the Indo-Pacific concept has been there for quite some time, and the Americans have been considering themselves as a big Pacific power, and they take it back to actually 1794. At that time, when they used to send ships to China and to India, they opened their first consulate in 1794. So what we see is that they consider it, and with the rise of China, in fact, all the countries in the region, they started noticing the Chinese aggression, aggressive behavior, and expansionism as well as hegemonistic attitudes. And when we saw that again in 2013 and 14, when China started its Belt and Road Initiative, Maritime Silk Policy, and then subsequently the Digital Health Silk Route, as it's called. So it began to emerge that China was trying to create a different kind of a global pole. And that was not driven by the normally perceived international law, because you can imagine a country with 14, 15, it has borders with the 14, 15 countries, but it has trade with the border and territory disputes with about 23 countries. And all the countries in ASEAN and all the countries, Japan, Korea, every other country, and including, of course, India has a major problem because we also have a disputed border territory, which is the line of actual control at the moment. And we have had problems for the last nearly 1.5 years on our borders with China. Similarly, in the Indian Ocean, where India generally holds sway, and Indian Navy is supposed to be primary navy in the region, China is trying to get into the region. And as you know, that the Indo-Pacific is about 33 countries and 7 sub-regions. So if you look at that, then the economic potential of this region is extremely important. And therefore, the unbridled rise of China causes worry for all the countries. As far as India is concerned, as you know, in 2018, when Prime Minister Modi had gone to Singapore for the Shangri-La dialogue, at that time it has become quite strong because Japanese Prime Minister, when he had spoken in the Indian Parliament, he had talked about the confluence of the 2 seas and all that. So the idea emerged from there. The Americans provided the necessary heft, and Australia was roped into that. Now, when this Quad kind of an arrangement began, it was called Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, even though it has its origins from the, I would say, 2004 tsunami. But then thereafter, 2007 to 17, nothing happened. And then again in Manila 2017 when the Ministers of Foreign Affairs met and things had begun to push back. And we had seen that when President Biden came into power, he started this Quad Summit, firstly virtual in March and 6 months later, the full-fledged summit. So what it looks for? It is basically talking about that they are looking, all the countries in the region are looking for a free and open Indo-Pacific. Means every country has the right to go along in the navigation waters. Freedom of navigation is there. And then it is also inclusive and resilient. Means inclusive means all countries. It cannot be that China says that it is his area and it does not allow other countries' ships or the trade to happen from them. So therefore, it is very important that from there they are looking at this possibility, and therefore there should be all the rules, the regulations, UNCLOS, which is called United Nations Conference on the Law of the Seas, of which China is a member, must pass. But as you know, that China has been defying a lot in the process. For example, Philippines and China had a court case in the International Court of Justice, and the ruling was against China. But the China refused to comply with that ruling. So what we are seeing is that it does not listen to the reason for a rule-based order or the international law. And that's why all these countries are worried about this unbridled rise and are trying to come together, not to contain, but try to put about some kind of an order within the region.
Ambassador Trugnath, we've also seen that, as if you've explained about Quad and how countries have come together. We've also seen recently the formation of AUKUS, which brings Australia, UK and the US together. How do you feel that AUKUS on one hand and Quad on the other hand? Do you feel that both these pacts will work together in containing China better today?
Well, you know that one thing is for sure. I mean, let me talk from India's point of view and even Japan and from that perspective. You see that none of these countries have been saying, and India especially, that when it talks of an inclusive Indo-Pacific, it also does not exclude China from that, right? And our definition of the Indo-Pacific is also covers the Eastern Africa as well as Western Indian Ocean, that is West Asia, parts of it, apart from the standard which everybody else does it. So what happens is in this case, we are saying it is not a security or a defense alliance, or it is not even an alliance altogether. Even when Secretary Blinken was in Delhi, he said it is not a security alliance. So when all the countries are not ready to call China openly and or say that it is a security alliance against China, therefore you needed a certain kind of an instrument which could provide that heft, and that is what the US did. The US tried to create this new alliance with the countries with whom it already had that kind of a defense alliance, like for example with Australia and with the UK. So now they have tried to create this trilateral, and as you know that Australia has been flexing its muscles quite a bit against the Chinese, especially under Scott Morrison. So I do not see that it will actually have any major impact as far as Quad is concerned. And Quad actually has moved into a very different dimension now. And if you come to think of security, now security is not only the physical and military or naval security or the maritime security. Security also means economic security. And therefore, the 3 or 4 areas in which the Quad has been moving towards, and that is one is, as you know, we are fighting the pandemic. So they started talking about the vaccines, made India into
Ambassador Trugnath, if I was just to interrupt and say that if I was to play the devil's advocate and take the critique that has been coming the way of Quad quite a bit, and that is that maybe Quad's agenda, and as you were pointing out, there has been the COVID challenges and the climate change. Do you feel that Quad has maybe expanded its agenda a little too much, and maybe the focus needs to be much more the way it is being kept in AUKUS, and that is the security concerns, especially in the face of a very belligerent China?
You see, you have to look at it from 2 points of view. One is the warlike situation, let's say security perspective, totally 100% security. Now that India does not want to enter into an alliance, it has bilateral relations with all the countries in the region. It has excellent relations, trade relations, economic relations with China, which is its largest trading partner. Second largest is the United States in this sense. It has developed great relationship with Australia, with Japan, with France, and many other countries, UK. So what is happening now is, China is not looking at a military expansionism in that sense of the. It considers Southeast China Sea as its backyard and front yard. So all ASEAN countries has a problem, but it wants to resolve with the ASEAN countries within the ambit of ASEAN plus China. It does not want the outside powers to come and try to work. But then every country has a relationship with the ASEAN countries because of the importance. Even in the Quad, centrality is of that of the ASEAN. Whatever is the ASEAN rules that are there. Now you look at the economic potential. Main thing is the economic potential now in this. So geoeconomics is playing out. What is China doing, as I mentioned, is the BRI. Like it is connecting all the countries in its periphery, which it wants to connect with, through its BRI, through its Maritime Silk Road initiatives, through digital health security initiatives. So it is trying to create that kind of a network. Now, you have to come up with something different. We have seen that during the pandemic, what happened? During the pandemic, global value supply chains were so skewed and that they were all broken virtually in that. So therefore, alternates have to be found. And that's why in the Quad, the thing is to challenges. That's what I said. The definition of security can include many dimensions. And it is, since nobody is ready to go for war like that, just like that, but it may be supporting in case that happens, then Quad, they of course could be the front runner in that, and the other countries could come along. So that is quite possible. But I do not see that at the moment any country is looking at militarily confronting China, or China is looking to militarily confront these countries. But at the same time, since the global dynamic is going through a churn, and or I would call a global disorder exists at the moment, I think everybody is trying to fasten their belts.
Ambassador Trugnath, we also saw the Prime Minister's highly successful visit to the US recently. And one of the highlights of this visit has been the Quad Summit, where we had the US President and the leaders of Japan and Australia also in attendance. One of the main agendas of Quad has always been this cooperation in the Indo-Pacific to ensure that it remains an open space, a free space. Do you feel that this in-person meeting of the Quad leaders and Prime Minister Modi going there, meeting these leaders personally, has also lent strength, one, to the Quad, and second, of course, when the Quad as a pact becomes strong, we also find the discussion on Indo-Pacific then automatically follows a more positive trajectory?
Yes, you are absolutely right. I think that the Quad, in fact, I would say, got the real fillip during the time of President Trump in the first place, but that was going a little bit more taking on China through trade wars and all that. So a near war-like situation, Cold War-like situation was created at the time. But then President Biden came and, we did not have any meetings before that. As I mentioned, so after a long time in 2017, it started picking up. And then we had the foreign ministers meeting, and that is the first time even India used the word Quad. It was not used. And then in March, when a virtual summit was held, and that was in the backdrop of the pandemic, where China is supposedly the origin of the virus. So I think that this has brought a newer dimensions to it. And not only that they met virtually, but the fact that they came out with a joint statement, which was called the Spirit of Quad, in which 3 or 4 areas like critical technologies, climate change, the COVID vaccines, and critical technologies, rare earths, all these were mentioned. These are very important things for the next remaining part of the 21st century. So therefore, these areas were found out, and India is emerging as a global value supply chains as far as the vaccines and the medicines are concerned. So we don't have any at the moment, but this is what we're going to be combined with our vaccine diplomacy.
You were listening to a discussion on the quest for a free, open and an inclusive Indo-Pacific. This is All India Radio giving you the world news. For quick news updates round the clock, follow us on Twitter at AIR News Alerts.
Welcome back to World News. Japan's former Foreign Minister Fumio Kishida has won the governing party leadership election and is set to be the next Prime Minister. Kishida replaces outgoing party leader Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga, who is stepping down after serving only 1 year since taking office last September. As new leader of the Liberal Democratic Party, Kishida is certain to be elected the next Prime Minister on Monday in Parliament, where his party and coalition partner control the House. Kishida beat Taro Kono, the vaccination minister, in a runoff after moving ahead of 2 female candidates, Sane Takaichi and Chiko Noda, in the first round. North Korea tested a newly developed hypersonic missile today, state news media KCNA reported. South Korea's military said that North Korea fired the missile towards the sea off its east coast. Pyongyang called on the United States and South Korea to scrap their double standards on weapons program to restart diplomatic talks. The development of the weapons system increases North Korea's defense capabilities. KCNA said that describing the hypersonic missile as a strategic weapon.
And now a report from the business world.
At the stock markets, the Sensex at the Bombay Stock Exchange lost 254 or 0.4% to end at 59,413 points today. The Nifty at the National Stock Exchange fell 37 points or 0.2% to 17,711. At the domestic foreign exchange market, the rupee weakened by 11 paise to 74 rupees and 15 paise against the US dollar. Among global markets, Asian markets ended mostly lower today. So Japan's Nikkei 225 index ended 2.1% lower. China's Shanghai Composite Index lost 1.8% at the close, and South Korea's Kospi Index slipped 1.2%, and Singapore's Straits Times Index shed 0.1%. But Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index rose 0.7%. In Europe, London's FTSE 100 and Germany's DAX had risen by 0.8% each, while France's CAC 40 had climbed 1.1% in intraday trade. Global crude oil prices fell today after U.S. crude inventories unexpectedly rose amid concerns about a slowing Chinese economy. So Brent crude oil futures declined 60 cents to trade at $78.49 a barrel. U.S. crude futures dropped 52 cents to $74.77 per barrel. U.S. oil, gasoline and distillate stockpiles rose last week, according to market sources citing American Petroleum Institute figures on Tuesday. Back home, gold advanced 264 rupees to 45,123 rupees per 10 grams at Delhi's bullion market. Arjun Chaudhary for World News, All India Radio.
To increase public awareness of cardiovascular diseases, their prevention and their global impact, World Heart Day is being observed and celebrated annually on September the 29th. World Heart Day was first founded in 1999 with the World Heart Federation, WHF, collaborating with the World Health Organization. This year, the theme of the World Heart Day is Use Heart to Connect. Now, let us take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. The Washington Post says Russia threatens to block YouTube after German channels were deleted over coronavirus misinformation. The Guardian writes European Union seeks to tighten Belarus visa rules amid growing migrant crisis. The Guardian also writes Fumio Kishida set to be the new Japanese PM after winning party election. Financial Times reports global bond market set for worst month since early 2021. The Globe and Mail says Myanmar's military junta powerless as currency dropped 60% in 4 weeks.
A quick look at the headlines once again. Indian Cabinet approves a 4,400 crore rupees investment in Export Credit Guarantee Corporation of India Limited. Also extends foreign trade policy up to 31st of March next year. India achieved another milestone in COVID vaccination drive with total vaccination crossing 88 crore mark. Recovery rate reaches 97.83%. American generals admit that they advised U.S. President not to withdraw troops from Afghanistan, calls it a strategic failure. Japan's former Foreign Minister Fumio Kishida set to become next Prime Minister of Japan after winning governing party leadership election. And North Korea tested a newly developed hypersonic missile on Wednesday. India is celebrating the 151st birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. Before we end, let us listen to his favorite bhajan, Vaishnav Jan, by artists from UK. This bulletin will be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.